Hello and welcome everyone. So sorry about that slight technical difficulty. We are back and we're going to get started. My name is Lonnie Furbank and I'd like to welcome you to Food Tank's webinar series. Today we have Laura Batcha, the Executive Director and CEO of the Organic Trade Association with us, and her presentation will explain how organic agriculture can reduce rural poverty. This webinar will be recorded and posted on foodtank.com after the presentation. You can also follow along and participate on Twitter using the hashtag foodtank. Throughout the webinar, please submit your questions using the questions tab in your control panel, or you can email them to me at Lonnie, Lani.Furbank, Furbank, @gmail.com. So without further ado, Laura, it's truly an honor to have you here with us today, and we're looking forward to your insights. I'll turn the floor over to you now.
Thank you, Lonnie. And let's just confirm for me that the audience, the sound is coming through clearly for the audience before I get started. Are we set?
We can all hear you. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. So welcome back, everyone. I really want to spend some time with you all today talking about some exciting research out of Penn State University conducted by Professor Ted Janicki on the benefits to local economies of organic hotspots in the United States. It's an exciting piece of research that for the first time really takes a rigorous statistical econometric look on the impact to rural development from organic production systems. We've always had an intuitive sense, and there have been lots of sociological studies and inferences based on price premiums and labor practices that organic had an impact on local economies, but this is really the first time this work has come together in a meaningful way through the economics. The report is based on 3 studies conducted by Ted at Penn State along with his grad students. 2 of them have been published. The 3rd has been submitted and accepted for publication. It's pending. The Trade Association, the Organic Trade Association, did not provide any funding to Penn State to conduct this research. It was all funded by Penn State University itself. And Ted was gracious enough to work with us to summarize the 3 reports into one white paper and help us make the research results translatable to broader audiences. I am not an ag economist, and so I'm going to be skimming the surface on this with you all. At the end of the presentation, there's a download button where you can access the full report, including a series of appendices provided by Ted and all of the citations. So for members of the scientific community that might be participating today, you can have access to all that information at the end of the slideshow. Just for background and to provide some context, you know, I think we all know that organic is one of the fastest growing sectors of the U.S. food industry and agriculture. Double-digit growth, over $43 billion a year in 2016. Crops that command a premium at what we consider the farm gate, off the farm. Demand rising, new farmers coming in to transition, and a lot of new entrepreneurial brands sprouting up all over the country. What this means for local economies in terms of organic hotspots is that the research shows, and I will walk you through it, that there are lower poverty rates, higher median household incomes in counties that are organic hotspots, and that the key driver to the development of these hotspots is outreach and knowledge transfer amongst participants at the county level, and that in fact the economics show that organic can be used as a development tool. So what is an organic hotspot, and how did Dr. Janicki identify them for the purpose of his work? He used statistical tools that are used by all industries to identify clusters within an industry sector. And the way he went about doing this was that the data itself came from the USDA National Organic Programs database of certified operations. One of the reasons that he could do this work for organic is because organic, being the original farm-to-table traceability system, every farm, every handler, every food manufacturer is certified and registered in a database at USDA. So he can actually access that data and use it for the analysis. Hotspots are defined as counties with statistically high numbers of organic operations, whether or not they be farms or businesses. And those counties have neighboring counties that also have statistically high number of operations. So it's not one county itself, it's a county surrounded by counties. And in the work, Dr. Janicki also can slice and dice this data and look just at crop hotspots, just at livestock hotspots, just at handler or food maker hotspots, and then all organic hotspots together. And in the data, he also uses two terms that are called outliers. And outliers, they take two forms. One type of outlier is a county with a high statistical number of organic operations, but that county is surrounded by other counties that do not show a high statistical number of operations. And then the inverse is the outlier where the county does not have a high number of organic operations, but has neighboring counties that do. So those are considered outliers, sort of warm and cool spots. This data shows you the map of the organic hotspots in the United States in 2009 and 2013. I mean, I think for folks who follow organic agriculture, this is not a big surprise with the coastal presentation of the hotspots as well as the upper Midwest. I think this is a reflection of the types of crops that are predominantly grown in the United States and production systems in organic. Half of the plate, so to speak, in organic is fresh fruits and vegetables and dairy, and that is reflected in the map that you see. And we're very interested in some of these emerging light pink spots, these outliers, because these are counties with high numbers of operations that haven't yet been surrounded by other counties, but they offer promise, we think, in terms of areas of focus for rural development. So I'm going to first show you these fantastic results. Then I'm going to take you through put them in context, and then explain the process that Dr. Janicki went through to determine and have confidence in causality, rather than hotspots being in places where incomes are higher, which would be the reverse. So the impact shown from his study is that if you look at poverty rates, and the average poverty rate in the United States right now is 16% in rural counties, that the presence of organic hotspots in a county reduces the poverty rate by 1.35% for all organic hotspots. The reduction in poverty in handling hotspots is just over 1% and 1.2 when it's farm-based hotspots. So the strongest benefit to the reduction in poverty comes in counties where both producers and food makers are together in the county with an integrated local economy in that way. Now, I will say, when I say local economy, I mean local production economy. 85% of the production in organic coming off the farm enters the distribution system and is sold outside of the direct area of the production. If you look at the impact to median household income, this is very striking as well. For production hotspots, the increase in median household income is $1,000 a year, almost $1,089 a year, over $2,500 a year for handling hotspots, and then all the hotspots together, over $2,000 a year increase in median household income for every household in the county that's designated as a hotspot. And those are some dramatic results. If you put it in context with the average poverty rate, the decline in the rate of poverty by 1.35 percentage points represents almost an 8% drop in poverty compared to the average county. And in 2012, the average median household incomes for all counties used in this analysis was just about $44,500. So that increase in over $2,000 is almost a 5% increase in relative terms. So one of the questions that everyone asks immediately when you see these striking numbers, is it that economically healthy counties are attracting organic businesses, Or is it that the organic businesses aggregating there are creating this economic positive effect? So Dr. Janicki used a number of techniques to get at this question of reverse causality. And one technique he used, he calls replacing the hotspot indicator with its prediction. And for those that are really interested in these details, again, he has all of his appendices at the back of the slideshow here, but it really is a approach that he sort of mimics a drug trial. So he looks at all of the other factors that are associated with counties that are economic hotspots and uses those as predictors. And then the same way you would do a control, he finds counties that exhibit all of those factors except they aren't an economic hotspot for organic. And then he compares the economic indicators and shows that the effect is not there. So all things being equal, absence the concentration of organic operations, you don't see the positive effects on the economic indicators. And then the second technique that he used is sort of, I think of it as the time travel technique. So he's using data sets from 2009 and 2012. And one of the things that he does is he pulls the economic activity from the 2009, the hotspot data from 2009 and the economic activity data from 2012, and separates the two variables by the two different time series. And through this process shows that outcomes in 2012 can't affect what happened back in 2009. So it's like this reverse time lag to show that it's not the reverse causality. And when you look at the results in poverty reduction, just for context and comparison, we looked at how that relates to some very important programs. Now, these are national programs. These are the impact of these fundamental programs on every county in America. But I'm doing it just to show you what types of public policies that are intended to reduce poverty, what that result actually is. So the census found that SNAP was responsible for about a 1.5 percentage point reduction in overall poverty rate. Now, that's all counties. But in counties where there are clusters of organic operations that are a hotspot in that county, the local poverty rate is reduced by 1.35%. So it puts it in the place where it can happen into the realm of a potentially very legitimate tool for rural poverty. So one of the next questions that you would have in looking at this kind of data is, well, is this just about agriculture? How do you know that this is about organic agriculture alone? And so Dr. Janicki did a comparable analysis of agricultural hotspots. So on the left of your screen, you see the organic production hotspots map, and we've seen this before, but now you're looking at it with the hot spots, the cold spots, and the two different types of outliers that I identified. And on the right, you're seeing general agricultural hotspots. So the same work was done with the spatial statistics to identify counties with high concentrations of agriculture activity surrounded by other counties with high concentration of agriculture activities. So when you look at this map, a couple things you'll see. The geographic distribution of hot and cold spots between agriculture and organic, there are differences in where the hot and cold spots are. And then in addition to spatially the differences, what's the difference in the impact to the economy? So with the same technique that was used for the organic hotspots, except in this case, we're only looking at the production hotspots because that data that was used for the general agricultural hotspots comes from the USDA agriculture census, and that's farm only. It takes out the food making economy. So we're comparing it to the farm only production hotspots for organic to the general agricultural hotspots. And you can see that the net impact here is that the general agricultural hotspots statistically have no impact on poverty rates or median household incomes. The slight increase in both for general agricultural hotspots is below the level of statistically significant versus zero impact. And then again, you see the impact from the organic production hotspots with a 1.2% reduction in poverty and a $1,089 increase in the average household income. So this is really demonstrating that it's not agriculture that's improving the rural economy based on these assessment metrics, but it's about it being an organic agricultural hotspot. Some of the other economic indicators that were looked at, just to share with you all, is unemployment and the reduction of a little over 0.2%, almost 0.25% unemployment in the organic hotspot, lower unemployment rates, just under 1%, per capita income increase as well. So what drives hotspot formation? I mean, this is one of the most interesting, questions in this is, if we understand what drives the hotspots, then we can craft and support policies that do just that and expand this economic opportunity in rural communities. So of all the factors that Dr. Janicki looked at, the strongest correlation was that in areas where there was an increased outreach service, the led to organic hotspot formation. So areas that had certifying agencies associated with nonprofits that conducted technical assistance and outreach, areas where state governments have organic certification within the state government and programs within the state government, that's also associated with the formation of organic hotspots. And it's because the nature of that technical assistance and exchange of information is unique in organic because of the requirements of the production system. So the outreach services for general agriculture do not meet the need for knowledge transfer for organic production systems. But this outreach, technical assistance, and the ability for there to be a network effect is very important in the formation of these hotspots. We talked a lot about this, but this is a summary of some of the things that Dr. Janicki did to confirm that these results were solid and meaningful. The spatial statistics methods that we discussed, the non-randomness corrections that we discussed, the variable time lags. When he looked at the economic impact at the county level of a hotspot, he excluded the surrounding counties that were also hotspots to prevent from cross-county impact if there was just a movement of work across the county lines, etc. Comparing to the general agricultural hotspots, and then adding some additional indicators there to corroborate. He conducted this work a couple of ways and came up with similar results. So that was another technique that Dr. Janicki used. So what are the implications for policymakers? And then another important question that we've been asking ourselves, what could come next from this type of research? So I wanted to take a few minutes and go through that with you all. This overarching question is whether organic agriculture can be used as an economic development tool. We believe that this work, makes that an unrefutable yes, and that this data is important to policymakers at all levels, local, state, and national, in terms of having an interest in investing in and promoting organic agriculture within the food system as a way to improve the livelihoods of folks living in the county. So I think specifically looking at that as a policy implication, as a trade association, and also I think generally as a food movement, we have a tendency to look at national and federal policy levers. And I think For us, this is a really good reminder that we need to be working closely with the states and the counties and local levels where those outliers are, to go right in and work with those states and those counties to help try to stimulate those outreach services to benefit the economies there and expand the organic production systems. And while the federal work will remain important as we look to the next Farm Bill, we want to be thinking about ways to create policies that expand and live at the state and local level to truly maximize this effect. We're looking at the focus on rural development, particularly within the Farm Bill, organic transition, capital structures, and barriers to investment. So this is all about access to capital, access to land, favorable loans, removing barriers that block investment in organic production systems. And there's a number of sort of technical policy barriers in place right now that hold back capital from being invested into organic systems, whether or not it's the understanding of organic and the risk and the premiums at the local banking level and within the credit unions, or whether or not it's arcane policy infrastructures like federal milk marketing orders that require organic businesses to pay money in to support conventional prices rather than investing into transitioning farms to organic for longer term benefit in rural development. So we're focused a lot on these types of policies as a result of this work. Of course, expanding outreach efforts and facilitating these network effects. I mean, this is identified as the key driver of the hotspot formation. So the USDA system for extension and what's left of extension and the Farm Service Agency, these systems are not geared and do not have built-in expertise on organic production. So the sector has had to fill that gap on its own through the use of NGOs and businesses investing in their own supply chain. So we really need to figure out how to have a steady investment in this outreach, not only through the private sector, but through state and local governments and federally, a better expertise in-house through FSA, NRCS, and what's left of county extension. And then we're also looking at targeting specific geographic areas for development. Those outlier areas where there's a county with a high level of organic operations, they were clustered in the south and the southeast, but they're not yet surrounded by other counties. Those are prime areas to really try to focus some investment in the development of organic systems. Those are also areas of the country that tend to have higher poverty rates, particularly in rural areas. And then I think one area that is most exciting to me is what this data means in terms of the ability to build broader coalitions within the food movement, especially as we think about at this early stage heading into the next Farm Bill. So, you know, I'm thinking about what this means for coalitions with folks obviously dedicated to rural poverty, coalitions with organizations and folks that are primarily focused on minimum wage, farm worker health, farm worker safety. And I think that within sort of the Farm Bill rubric, the direct connection of shared interest between the organic community and the hunger community and the labor community, I think, has not been as strong as it could. And, you know, my hope for this research is that it really facilitates building those bridges and developing an understanding of shared interest going into sort of the big 5-year omnibus Farm Bill. And we're really hoping to share this data with members of those communities so that we can begin thinking together about what mutually beneficial policies we might be able to all craft and support together. You know, we of course are looking for increased funding as we think ahead for these existing programs and new programs, and that there be an emphasis on organic in the federal programs that go out so that there's a recognition that that's a good return on investment. Technical assistance, targeting counties, neighboring existing hotspots to try to help catalyze those counties as well, sort of build off the cluster model, and find ways for those counties to celebrate success and share with other counties to create that network effect that's based on celebrating success and identifying with each other across counties. Some of the areas of additional research that have immediately risen to the surface as people have been exposed to Dr. Janicki's data are in a couple of areas. This is a national look. Is there a role for an international view on the economic impact of organic hotspots globally? Also using these econometric techniques and looking at things like measuring the outcomes in terms of ecosystem services instead of economic indicators. So is there a way to look at this data on organic hotspots and determine whether or not there's a net impact on some key ecosystem services measures like water quality or pesticide exposure, that type of thing. So I think there are some interesting avenues for future research based on some of the solid models that Penn State has developed here in these 3 papers. And I think with that, Lonnie, I'm ready to pause and see what we have for questions from the audience.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Laura. That was a really enlightening presentation, and we've had a lot of buzz about it. You've been really thorough and answered a lot of our questions. But one of the first questions we have is from Marty, and he says that many nonprofits have the knowledge to help, but they need more resources. So we're wondering what opportunities are there for on-the-ground support in the future to hopefully give nonprofits the support they need to continue building more hotspots.
That's great. Especially in some of the targeted areas, perhaps in the South, one of the things that we're thinking about in terms of the next Farm Bill is looking at that rural development title, and a lot of those are grant funds, and trying to find a way to very specifically call out as a priority this organic outreach as it relates to rural development. So I think it's about partially new money, but partially really focusing the access to existing monies in rural development on this as one of the best ways you can get a return on investment, with specific RFPs going out just about those technical services in organic, and maybe just about those technical services in organic located in specific geographic areas with a real targeted strategic approach at it. So I think some of it may be entirely new programs, some of it may be helping shape existing programs so that they shine a light on this opportunity and the way that they're implemented.
Okay, great. And another question we have is, so far, has there been any direct response from government or policymakers about the findings, or what do you anticipate the response to be?
When we released the report, Dr. Janicki was with me here in Washington, and we did a little tour with a preliminary rollout of the data, and we met with USDA's Organic Working Group, and they brought in folks from around the agencies, but the staff from Rural Development was particularly interested in the work, and we're doing some follow-up with them so they can really understand it. And I think that's an important place for them to integrate this, and with the goal being really willing to put the O word with a capital O, organic, in those RFPs as a priority, because I think the inference is, oh, this is great, we just keep doing what we're doing without making that direct linkage. We won't get as far as if we make the linkage. We also had an opportunity to present the data to the White House Domestic Policy Council and their Rural Poverty Task Force, and they're doing some work on how to alleviate poverty. And so there's some follow-up work that they've requested there to sort of understand, does this hotspot effect hold in some of the areas of the country that have the most chronic and persistent poverty? So we're exchanging with them to do some analysis to look at that, because they want to understand that, as that's their focus. And then the White House Domestic Policy Council has a team on looking at things that help support transition of acres to organic, and they're interested in the data that we presented as well. And we've briefed Congress on it, and we're really seeing it as a platform where we can begin to make the case going into the next Farm Bill. We'll be presenting this research in an article by Dr. Janicki in the quarterly publication of the Federal Reserve, talking to investment firms and bankers, private equity, community banks, about taking a look at organic as a viable place for a return on investment that has the benefit of rural development. So we're excited about that publication coming out this fall as well. So we're beginning to get some traction with it.
Wonderful. We look forward to seeing where that goes. And we have another listener who's wondering, what does this mean specifically for consumers? Is there a way that consumers can help amplify this effect, or what does it mean for prices at the grocery store?
You know, that's a really interesting question, and I hadn't really thought about it from how consumers amplify the effect, except to say that consumers that care about a whole host of things also remember that purchasing organic is a fair wage action, and rural poverty reduction action, and pro-farmer, et cetera. So I think, you know, for all of us, as we think about the choice set that consumers are making, to help consumers understand that if they care about those issues, there's a real another reason to purchase organic. And then the second part of that question was about expanding what role can consumers play. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, there's some interesting, you know, ideas that some of our task forces have begun to throw around, is there a program that is sort of a mobile or regional, you know, gathering days where this information could be shared and exchanged to create like a kickoff to that knowledge transfer within a targeted area. And I think, you know, with that, there would be a fantastic way to build in participation from the consumer in that as part of those communities.
Wonderful. And we have another listener who's wondering if the OTA has plans to build on this, and in what way, like in terms of more research.
Our first plan is to really work on disseminating this research, because we think it's really fantastic. The areas that we've looked at for additional research, you know, I named a couple, which is how could this be applied to ecosystem services and pollution reduction? How could it be applied internationally? Dr. Janicki has identified that, of course, a regular update to the data, so you create a long time series, would be an important part of sort of building the knowledge case. And then, you know, he's expressed interest in other researchers using his model and running the numbers and going through that rigor of replicating results. So he's really interested in fully sharing the models with other agricultural economists, so that people can begin using the tool and we can get a track record of repeated results as well.
Okay, wonderful. And to wrap things up, we'll take this one last question from a listener who's wondering what your ideal goal for this research, if you could, in an ideal world, what would be the result of what this research means, and how would it affect the future of organic?
Oh, that's great. So for me, I'll answer that personally. Like, my ideal goal would be to come back in 3 to 5 years and see those light pink outliers throughout the Southeast in areas where folks struggle with chronic poverty and rural opportunities, and see those have grown into organic hotspots because the right policies have been applied, and farmers, ranchers, and entrepreneurs in those areas have been able to get in the market and create sustainable, viable businesses. So seeing those pinks turn to red.
Well, that would certainly be great. And we just got one more. I'm wondering. Let's see. So the asker is wondering about the difference between fruits and vegetables versus other commodity crops? And is there a difference between those types of hotspots, or was that not something that was specifically looked at?
Well, I'm going to try to toggle back here to the map of the organic hotspots so we can take a look at that. So the limitation of the data that Dr. Janicki has access to is the USDA National Organic Programs Database, which is a registry of all certified operations. When certifiers issue certificates, they issue them under certain, what we call scopes of certification, and that is crop production, livestock production, wild harvesting, and handling. So with the available data, TED was able to sort by crop and livestock using the existing data in the NOP database. And so there's not the available data set that breaks it down that way. So for what we have now, for these purposes, it's crops, livestock, and handling. The National Organic Program is just completing a revamp of their database with some monies that were allocated in the last Farm Bill, and will, I hope, continue to make their database robust. So if there was a data set that broke down crops into row crops, field crops, specialty crops, fruits, vegetables to that level in the database, then that data could get pulled through the model. But the key to all this, as I understand it from Dr. Janicki, is to have the verifiable data feeding into the system.
Right, absolutely. Well, that's all great things to keep in mind. And thank you so much for that look towards the future. We really appreciated having you here, Laura Batcha, the Executive Director and CEO of the Organic Trade Association. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you to all of our listeners for sending in those great questions. It was truly a pleasure. Food Tank's next webinar will be on Wednesday, July 6th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, and you can register on foodtank.com. Thank you again to everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you, Food Tank, for the opportunity.